Hi friend, welcome back to my channel English Story today. Today I will tell you a ghost story, so let us begin.
Le Chunk is a traditional horror story written via Anthony Boucher. It's about a person who hears legends, approximately an historical circle of relatives of vampires. The story changed into published in Unknown Worlds in August 1943 and seemed in the century's high-quality horror fiction. There has been no path, handiest the almost vertical ascent, crumbled rock for some yards, with the roots of sage locating their scanty lifestyles within the dry soil. Then jagged outcroppings of crude crags, occasionally with accidental footholds, sometimes with overhanging and untrustworthy branches of greasewood, every so often, and not using a aid to mountaineering but the leverage of your muscle mass and the ingenuity of your balance. The sage turned into as drably green because the rock turned into drably brown. The handiest color changed into the occasional rosy spikes of a barrel cactus. Hugh Tollant swung himself up onto the last top. It had a deliberate, fashioned look, approximately it, a petrified fortress of Lilliputians, a Gibraltar of pygmies. Tollant perched on its battlements, and unslung his disciplined glasses. The wasteland valley unfolded under him. The tiny cluster of buildings that changed into oases, the exiguous cluster of hands that gave name to the city and safe haven to his very own tent and to the shack he turned into constructing, the lifeless ended highway leading straightforwardly to not anything, the oiled roads diagramming the vacant blocks of an constructive subdivision. Tollant noticed none of these. His glasses had been constant beyond the oasis and the city of oasis on the dry lake. The gliders have been clean and bright to him, and the uniformed men busy with them have been as sharply and minutely visible as a nest of ants under glass. The education school turned into greater than normally active. One glider especially, abnormal to Tollant, regarded the point of interest of attention. Men might come and examine it, and glance again at the older models in assessment. Handiest the nook of Tollant's left eye was now not preoccupied with the brand new glider. In that corner something moved, something little and skinny and brown because the earth. Too big for a rabbit, an awful lot too small for a man. It darted across that nook of imaginative and prescient, and Tollant discovered gliders oddly tough to pay attention on. He set down the bifocals and intentionally regarded about him. His pinnacle surveyed the slim, flat place of the crest. Not anything stirred. Not anything stood out towards the sage and rock, however, one barrel of rosy spikes. He took up the glasses again and resumed his observations. When he became carried out, he methodically entered the consequences inside the little black pocket book. His hand became nevertheless white. The wasteland is bloodless and regularly sunless in iciness. But it became a firm hand, and as properly educated as his eyes, completely capable of recording faithfully the designs and dimensions which they'd registered so correctly. As soon as his hand slipped, and he needed to erase and redraw, leaving a smudge that displeased him. The lean, brown element had slipped throughout the brink of his imaginative and prescient again. Going toward the east side, he might swear, wherein that set of rocks jutted just like the spines at the lower back of a stegosaur. Handiest while his notes were finished did he yield to curiosity, and even then with cynical self-reproach. He turned into bodily worn out, for him an uncommon kingdom, from this each day hiking and from clearing the floor for his shack to be. The eye muscle groups play abnormal worried tricks. There could be nothing at the back of the stegosaur's armor. There was nothing. Nothing alive and transferring, simplest the torn and half-plucked carcass of a chook, which regarded as even though it were gnawed by using a few small animal. It become midway down the hill in Western terminology, though anywhere east of the Rockies it might were taken into consideration a sizable mountain, that Toland once more had a glimpse of a moving parent. But this become no trick of a fearful eye. It changed into now not little nor skinny nor brown. It became tall and extensive and wore a noisy pink and black lumber jacket. It bellowed, "Toland!" in a contented and lusty voice. Toland drew close to the person and said, "Hello." He paused and brought, "Your benefit, I assume." The man grinned extensively. "Don't recognize me properly? I dare say 10 years is a long time, and the California desert ain't precisely the Chinese rice fields. How's stuff? Nevertheless loaded down with secrets on the market?" Toland attempted desperately no longer to react to that shot, however he stiffened a little. "Sorry, the prospector get-up had me fooled." "True to look you again, Morgan." The person's eyes had narrowed. "Simply having my little comic story," he smiled. "Of direction you don't have any severe cause for mountain climbing round a glider faculty, now, could you? And also you'd sort of need subject glasses to keep an eye at the quiet birdies. I'm out here for my health." Toland's voice sounded unnatural even to himself. Positive. You were constantly in it for your fitness. And come to consider it, my very own fitness ain't been none too correct lately. I've got me a touch cabin manner to hell and long gone round right here, and that I do me a bit prospecting now and then. And somehow it simply strikes me, Toland, like maybe I hit a pretty appropriate load these days." "Nonsense, old man. You could see. I'd sure hate to tell any of them army guys out at the field some of the memories I recognize about China and the sort of guys I used to know available. Wouldn't cotton to them testimonies a chunk, the Navy wouldn't. However, if I used to be to have a drink too many and get talkative like." "Inform you what?" Toland suggested brusquely. "It's getting close to sundown now, and my tent's chilly for nighttime visits. But drop round inside the morning, and we'll speak over old times. Is rum nevertheless your tipple?" "Positive is. Form of luxurious now, you apprehend. I'll lay some in. You could find the vicinity without problems, over by the oasis, and we is probably in a position to speak approximately your prospecting, too." Toland's thin lips had been set company as he walked away. The bartender opened a bottle of beer and plunked it on the damp circled counter. "That'll be 20 cents, he said. Then added as an afterthought, "Want a tumbler? Every now and then tourists too." Toland checked out the others sitting on the counter, the purple-eyed and unshaven antique man, the flight sergeant unhappily ingesting a Coke, it turned into after military hours for beer, the young guy with the lengthy, dirty trench coat and the pipe and the new-looking brown beard, and saw no glasses. "I wager I won't be a tourist," he determined. This changed into the primary time Toland had had a threat to go to the barren region recreation spot. It become as properly to be visible around in a community. In any other case humans begin to wonder and say, "Who's that guy out by the oasis? Why don't you ever see him anywhere?" The sports spot changed into quiet that night. The 4 of them on the counter, army boys taking pictures pool, and a half of dozen of the local men accrued about a spherical poker table, soberly and wordlessly cleansing a production employee whose mind regarded more on his beer than on his playing cards. "You just passing via?" the bartender requested sociably. Toland shook his head. "I'm shifting in." Whilst the army grew to become me down for my lungs, I determined I higher do something positive about it. Heard so much approximately your climate here, I thought I'd as properly try it. "Sure factor," the bartender nodded. "You are taking up till they started out this glider college, Pretty much each different guy you meet inside the desert is here for his health. Me, I had sinus, and examine me now. It's the air. Toland breathed the ecosystem of smoke and beer suds, however did not smile. I'm looking forward to miracles. You'll get 'em. Whereabouts you staying? Over that way a bit. The agent referred to as at the antique Kaka location. Toland felt the curious listening silence and frowned. The bartender had started out to speak, after which notion higher of it, the younger guy with the beard checked out him oddly. The vintage man constant him with purple and watery eyes that had a dwindled glint of pity in them. For a second, Toland felt a kickback that had nothing to do with the night air of the desert. The antique guy drank his beer in brief gulps and frowned as though looking to formulate a sentence. At final he wiped beer from his bristly lips and said, "You wasn't aiming to live inside the adobe, turned into you?" "No. It's quite much long past to pieces, easier to rig me up a bit shack than try to make the adobe livable. In the meantime, I've got a tent. That's all proper, then, maybe. However mind you don't pass poking round that there adobe. I don't think I'm apt to. However why not? Need any other beer?" The antique man shook his head reluctantly, and slid from his stool to the floor. "No thanks. I don't rightly recognize as I." "Yes? Not anything. Thank you all the identical." He grew to become and shuffled to the door. Toland smiled. "However why have to I stay clear of the adobe?" He known as after him. The vintage guy mumbled. "What?" "They bite," said the antique man, and went out shivering into the night. The bartender turned into lower back at his put-up. "I'm satisfied he didn't take that beer you presented him," he said. "Along approximately this time in the evening I should stop serving him." For once he had the feel to cease. Toland driven his own empty bottle forward. "I'm hoping I didn't frighten him away." "Frighten? Properly, mister? I assume maybe that's simply what you did do. He didn't need beer that sort of came, like you would possibly say, from the antique Kaka location. A number of the old-timers right here, they're funny that manner." Toland grinned. "Is it haunted?" "No longer what you'd name haunted, no. No ghosts there that I ever heard of." He wiped the counter with the material and seemed to wipe the issue away with it. The flight sergeant pushed his Coke bottle away, hunted in his pocket for nickels, and went over to the pinball system. The young guy with the beard slid onto his vacant stool. "Hope Antique Jake didn't fear you," he stated. Toland laughed. "I assume each town has its abandoned domicile with a grisly culture. But this sounds a touch unique. No ghosts, and they bite. Do you realize something approximately it?" "A little," the young man stated severely. "A little. Just enough to." Toland become curious. "Have one on me and inform me about it." The flight sergeant swore bitterly on the gadget. Beer gurgled through the beard. "You spot," the younger man started out, "the wilderness is so massive you couldn't be alone in it. Ever be aware that? It's all empty and there's not anything in sight, but there's always something shifting over there wherein you can't quite see it. It's something very dry and thin and brown, only whilst you look around it isn't there. Ever see it?" "Optical fatigue," Toland commenced. "Positive. I understand. Every man to his own legend. There isn't a tribe of Indians, hasn't got a few manner of accounting for it. You've heard of the Watchers? And the 20th century white man comes alongside, and it's optical fatigue. Best inside the 19th century matters weren't pretty the equal, and there were the Kakas. You were given a special localized legend? Name it that. You glimpse things out of the corner of your mind, identical such as you glimpse lean, dry things out of the corner of your eye. You encase them in solid condition and they're now not so bad. That is known as the increase of legend. The folk thoughts in action. You're taking the carcass and the things you don't quite see, and also you put 'em together. And that they bite. Tollant wondered how long that beard was soaking up beer. And what have been the carcass? He brought about courteously. Ever listen of Sawney Bean? Scotland, reign of James I, or perhaps the 6th, even though I suppose Roughhead's wrong on that for once. Or let's be extra current, ever pay attention of the Benders? Kansas inside the 1870s? No? Ever listen of Procrustes? Or Polyphemus? Or rate FIFO Foom? There are ogres, you know. They're no legend. They're reality, they are. The lodge where 9 visitors left for every 10 that arrived, the mountain cabin that sheltered travelers from the snow, sheltered them all iciness till the melting spring exposed their bones, the lonely stretches of street that so many passengers traveled half of manner, you'll find 'em everywhere. All over Europe and pretty tons on this U.S. Too earlier than communications have become what they're, profitable enterprise. And it wasn't simply the earnings. The Benders made cash, certain, but that wasn't why they killed all their sufferers as cautiously as a kosher butcher. Sawney Bean were given so he didn't deliver a damn approximately the profit, he just needed to lay in greater meat for the winter. And think of the possibilities you'd have at an oasis. So these carcass of yours have been, as you call them, ogres? Carcass, ogres, maybe they were Benders. The Benders have been in no way visible alive, after the townspeople observed those apparently butchered bodies. There's a rumor they got this a long way west. And the time checks pretty well. There wasn't any city here in the 80s. Simply multiple Indian families, closing of a demised tribe living on the oasis. They vanished after the carcass moved in. That's now not so surprising. The white race is a form of extraordinary ogre, besides. No one concerned about them. But they used to fear about why so many tourists by no means were given across this stretch of wilderness. The vacationers used to prevent over at the carcass, you notice, and somehow they frequently never got any farther. Their wagons be determined perhaps 15 miles past in the desolate tract. Now and again they determined the bones, too, parched and white. Gnawed looking, they said from time to time. And no one ever did anything approximately those carcass? Oh, certain. We didn't have King James VI, best I still assume it was first, to experience up on a excellent white horse for a gesture, but twice army detachments came here and wiped all of them out. 2 times? One wiping out might do for maximum families. Tollant smiled. Ah. That became no slip. They worn out the carcass twice due to the fact, you see, once didn't do any suitable. They wiped 'em out and nonetheless tourists vanished and nonetheless there have been gnawed bones. In order that they wiped 'em out once more. After that they gave up, and people detoured the oasis. It made an extended, harder trip, however, in the end. Tollant laughed. You imply to mention those carcass have been immortal? I don't recognize approximately immortal. They somehow just didn't die very easy. Maybe, if they were the Benders, and I sort of want to assume they have been, they learned a little more about what they have been doing out right here on the desolate tract. Maybe they put together what the Indians knew and what they knew, and it labored. Maybe whatever they made their sacrifices to understood them better out here than in Kansas. And what's turned out to be of them, apart from seeing them out of the corner of the eye? There's 40 years among the last of the Kaka history, and this new settlement on the oasis, and those Gainids speak a great deal about what they learned right here, inside the first 12 months or so. Handiest that they stay far from that old Kaka adobe. They inform some testimonies. The priest says he became sitting within the confessional one hot Saturday afternoon and notion he heard a penitent come in. He waited a long term and ultimately lifted the gauze to look become every person there. Something became there, and it bit. He's got 3 arms on his right hand now, which seems funny as hell when he gives a benediction. Tollant pushed their bottles toward the bartender. That yarn, my young friend, has earned another beer. How about it, bartender? Is he continually joyful like this? Or is this simply something he's improvised for my gain? The bartender set out the clean bottles with splendid solemnity. I wouldn't have told you all that myself, however then, he's a stranger too and perhaps don't experience the same manner we do right here. For him it's just a story. It's greater comfy that way, stated the younger man with the beard, and he took a firm keep on his beer bottle. However, as long as you've heard that a great deal, said the bartender, you would possibly as properly, it turned into closing iciness, while we had that bloodless spell. You heard funny tales that iciness. Wolves coming into prospectors' cabins simply to warm up. Properly, Enterprise wasn't so correct. We don't have a license for tough liquor, and the boys don't drink lots beer while it's that bloodless. However, they used to are available and besides because we were given that large oil burner. So one night time there's a group of 'em in right here, Antique Jake turned into right here, which you become speaking to, and his canine jigger, and I think I pay attention any person else come in. The door creaks a little. But I don't see nobody, and the poker game's going, and we're speaking much like we're speaking now, and all of a sudden I pay attention a sort of a noise like crack, over there in that corner in the back of the jukebox near the burner. I'm going over to see what is going and it gets away earlier than I'm able to see it very good. But it changed into little and skinny, and it didn't have no clothes on. It should have been damned bloodless that winter. And what changed into the cracking noise? Tollant requested dutifully. That was a bone. It need to have strangled Jigger with none noise. He become a bit dog. It ate most of the flesh, and if it hadn't cracked the bone for the marrow it could have completed. You can still see the spots over there. The blood in no way did pop out. There was silence during the tale. Now suddenly all hell broke free. The flight sergeant set free a brilliant yell and started out pointing excitedly on the pinball system and yelling for his payoff. The construction worker dramatically deserted the poker recreation, knocking his chair over within the system, and introduced lugubriously that these men right here had their personal rules. See? Any environment of Kaka-inspired horror was dissipated. Tollant whistled as he walked over to put a nickel within the jukebox. He glanced casually at the ground. Yes, there has been a stain, for what that turned into really worth. He smiled cheerfully, and felt alternatively grateful to the Kakas. They have been going to clear up his blackmail hassle very well. Tollant dreamed of power that night time. It was a common dream with him. He turned into a ruler of the brand new American corporate nation that might observe the warfare, and he said to this guy, "Come." And he came, and to that guy, "Move." And he went, and to his servants, "Try this." And that they did it. Then the young guy with the beard turned into status earlier than him, and the grimy trench coat become like the robes of an historic prophet. And the young guy stated, "You see yourself driving excessive, don't you? Driving the crest of the wave, the wave of the destiny, you name it. But there's a deep, dark undertow that you don't see, and that's a part